Good morning, everybody. It's a lovely clear day here in Dublin. I hope the weather's good where you guys are. My name is Richard Garry and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Gamma. Welcome to Gamma's second of 3 GeoInsurance webinars. Yesterday we had our first, which if you missed it, you can still register and actually see a recording of it. And next week we're going to have our third webinar on the 12th. Most of you probably know who Gamma are, but for those unfamiliar with who we are and what we do, Gamma is a cloud-hosted solutions provider that integrates software, data, services to help our clients reduce risk through location intelligence. So it's a bit of a mouthful that, but what exactly does that mean? So we provide solutions to the insurance sector, and these include the likes of geocoding, peril data like flood, subsidence, crime, prefill building level data from our AddressLink platform, which we're going to talk about today. And this includes building size, numbers of floors, rebuild cost calculation, that kind of thing. And all of this can be accessed through web services and also visualized within our mapping tool, Peril Finder. Yesterday we had 4 presentations on modeling techniques and how they can be used to build valuable data sets for insurance. Today we'll discuss new data developments and how LI is driving parametric insurance. And next week's webinar provides an overview of some of our recent white papers on the impact of climate change on properties across Ireland and the UK. You can still register for that event as well. Our speakers today are Richard Cantwell from Gamma, who will outline how we've created AddressLink. So it's a building level data repository for Ireland and the UK. Niall Kavanagh of Verisk will discuss data usage in motor, fraud and modelling. And Feargal O'Neill of Gamma will present how location intelligence is driving parametric insurance. We'll also be joined by Robert Moss of Zurich for a Q&A session towards the end, just to give us an industry perspective. Our first speaker, Richard Cantwell, is a senior GIS consultant with Gamma. He's going to provide an overview of AddressLink, Gamma's building level data repository. Richard has over 25 years experience in spatial analysis and not happy with spending his working day buried in maps and spatial data. In his spare time, he's also one of Ireland's foremost contributors to OpenStreetMaps. And he's also an active board member of IRLOGI, which is Ireland's organisation for geographic information. So I'll just hand over to Richard now, who'll take you through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Richard. As Richard did mention, I'm going to be talking about AddressLink, which is our building level data set for our database really for the UK and Ireland. And what it's about is it's kind of built around the address itself, because addresses are a very, very high resolution data set. They are resolvable with geocoding, and we see them as a sort of a smart glue, which allows us to link disparate data from a very wide range of sources, and we'll talk about some of those in a few minutes. But if you have an address, you can, using geocoding, you can derive a coordinate from that, and you can use that coordinate to link to spatial data sets. You can also use the address to link to other sources of data that you might have in the organization. So we see the address really as a sort of an atomic data unit that is the smallest resolvable unit of a data that we're interested in, and we can use it to link data sets together. And the kind of data that we're talking about comes from a very wide range of sources. I mean, we deal with state bodies, for example, the national mapping agencies, the various ordnance surveys, but also other national bodies such as the statistical agencies, the Central Statistics Office or the Office of National Statistics, the housing and environmental departments of the governments across the UK and Ireland produce very large volumes of data as well. And a lot of this is very valuable, and we can integrate that. And one of the things then that we integrate this with is our own in-house data that we've built up over the last 10 to 15 years. We have a very large volumes of point data, but also we work extensively with partners, and this allows us to leverage their domain expertise and bring that to our user base. And we find that our partners are certainly very responsive to market demands and requests. And they will typically be focused on a certain domains, whether it's flooding, whether it's subsidence, or customer demographics, and so on and so forth. And we're also newly working with a number of imagery providers, upstream and downstream. We're taking very large volumes of remotely sensed data, whether it is from satellite imagery, from aerial photography. And these data sets are absolutely ginormous, terabytes of data. So we're working at scale with that data, developing machine learning algorithms to extract meaningful data from that, whether it's even something as simple as detecting the roof of a building and then being able to assess its orientation and say, oh, this is a south-facing roof, therefore that roof may be suitable for solar panels or something like that. Or you can assess the roof condition, which might be a predictor of claims and so on. So there's a lot of data that can be extracted from these these various images, and we're working actively on that at the moment. And connecting all of this together is the geocoding performance. It needs to be superbly accurate and highly performant. We're pushing millions of address records at this at very, very high levels of accuracy. And of course, it has to be cost effective as well. So we're kind of pinning all of these things together at the address level. So what we have is market-leading geocoding capabilities in Ireland and in the UK. So we can resolve right down to the address using air code, using British postcode systems, and various other inputs into that. We work closely with a number of our partners in that, particularly AutoAddress, but also Precisely and some other providers. And this allows us to have seamless coverage across the UK and Ireland, both in terms of geocoding, but also then the ability to interrogate our data sets. And for a lot of our data, we have the data exists at address level, but there may be gaps in it. Not every address is recorded, and we need to fill in the gaps. So we have built up a significant amount of modeling expertise over the last number of years, and we have further advancements coming on stream in the near future. And this allows us to use these models and to fill in gaps in any address level data that we have. And ultimately what we're trying to do is synthesize data from our in-house sources, going back 10, 15 years, from our partner network, and also open data. As Richard mentioned, I'm particularly evangelist for open data, been involved in the open data movement in Ireland for a number of years. And there's more and more data coming out, and whatever about Ireland, certainly the UK is perhaps one of the leading countries in the world at making data openly available. But there are challenges, of course, with integrating all of these sources of data together. And one of the challenges is you have to be compliant with regulations. So we are very mindful and respectful and have systems in place to deal with regulations such as GDPR. So in terms of building out our AddressLink product, we're working in-house with multidisciplinary teams. We have a large development team with database and visualization expertise, cloud hosting. We are one of the earliest users of Amazon Web Services in the country. We have more than 10 years experience with it. And we have our modeling teams and our geography teams. So bringing all of these people, it's a fairly uniquely, I think it's a unique team in having all of this multidisciplinary expertise. We're also working at the moment closely with Queen's University Belfast on a fusion project, funded fusion project. We have hired staff on the back of that, which is enabling us to build out our product in Northern Ireland and also over into the UK in some instances. As I mentioned, we have at least 10 years of historical data. Gamma have been around for a long time, and over that period, we've built up a lot of historical data sets which are becoming valuable for change monitoring and the like. So we have a number of AddressLink modules, if you like, already available, and we have a staged delivery and management system in place to roll out new modules and to keep the existing modules maintained and up to date. There's a large amount of metadata and data management aspects to this. So we have a highly engineered data production system, which allows us to stage delivery and deliver timely updates to data if and when new data becomes available from new providers or upstream providers make some changes, or we source some data ourselves or capture it ourselves, so we can have systems in place to feed this into the models and use it to enrich our existing data sets or provide new modules. The kind of models then that we have either published or are about to publish, I'll just go through a few of them. We have burglary and fire risk models at very detailed level across Ireland. The crime data set actually is now just being completed for Ireland and the UK. It's a seamless data set. And we're currently working on the fire risk in both geographies. We have worked with fire services in Ireland to help build out that model. And it includes things such as arson, criminal damage, any dangerous activities near the point address which you're interested in. We also have obviously flood risk. This is something I think that's fairly well understood in the Irish market, at least in terms of what current models contain, whether it's the extent of the floods, types, what the return rate is, what the depth of the flood is going to be at the address. Are there any defenses? Are they going to have any impact? But these models are under constant development, and there's refreshes coming out all the time. We heard some talk yesterday from JBA about some new advances in their models. We'll be hearing next week from some of the work we've been doing with Ambiental in the UK and Ireland. So we can see that these models are constantly under revision, so staying on top of what's available is essential. And climate change is another major source of focus for us over the last number of months. We've been looking at how climate change is going to impact addresses around Ireland and the UK in terms of flooding, but also subsidence and erosion, the impact of more severe storms that we're expecting, droughts and how droughts might feed into subsidence, but they might also feed into impacts on agriculture. And again, we'll be talking a lot more about that at our event next week. So if you're interested in that, sign up. We also have models based around road traffic accidents, the prevalence of where they're happening, what the severity of them is. Inputs into that include things such as the road type, the road sinuosity, which is a scientific way of saying how bendy the road is, things like historic traffic volumes and other demographic variables that we can feed into that, things like the proportion of cars in an area, or the proportion of cars per household, and things like that in the area. So we'll be looking to enhance that model in future with additional data when it becomes available. And then one of the key elements in AddressLink is the descriptive building data itself. We have categorized building types, as I've divided into a range of different categories. What type of building is it? How old is the building? We have all this. We have the dimensions of the building, at least in terms of its floor space. We also have the height, so we can calculate the volume of the building. And in some cases, certainly for commercial properties, we have what the use of the building is. We have that done out by categorization of the business that's in there. And we're also working closely with data providers to get the use of buildings on a per floor basis. So we can figure out that there's a shop on the ground floor, there's an office on the first floor, and there's a storeroom and part office on the third floor, this kind of thing. And obviously then we also have energy rating. We've been working extensively in this area for the last number of years. I've launched some products off the back of it. And again, we have building energy rating modeled in some cases, and then we have actual data in others, particularly in the UK. So, we're bringing all of this in together, along with underpinning something that we've been doing in Gamma for a very long time. Since one of our earliest work that we were doing back in the 1990s was focusing on geodemographics around customer segmentation, spending by category, daytime and resident population, and so on. And we can attach this propensities to the addresses. So ultimately what we see is that AddressLink is already, and is going to become more so in the future, a very comprehensive data ecosystem, which contains data around, well, you can see here, building use, energy ratings, flood risks, burglary, fire risk, business categorizations, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're going with that. We also, obviously, as I mentioned at the outset, we have to remain on the right side of any regulatory compliance. We're very, very careful about this. We make sure that there's no personal data in any of our models, and we're very, very strict about that. We have GDPR checks and verification procedures. We have ISO 27001 certification in place. So again, we take our data protection and data security very, very seriously. We have very extensive partner arrangements in place. I've mentioned already that we work closely with AutoAddress, but you can see some of the other organizations here, whether it's on the floods side, where we work with both JBA and Ambiental, and we work with the chartered surveyors, whether they are in the UK or Ireland, the various ordnance surveys across the different geographies. Terra Firma are one of the main operators in the subsidence space in the UK. We're working closely with them. So you can see that we have a very large ecosystem built around who we are, and we're actively engaging with all of these people. And we are constantly exploring further opportunities in this area. So to wrap up, it's extensive building level data. Our aim is, and we are already providing seamless coverage across Ireland and the UK. The project has been under extensive development for, parts of it have been under development for years, but I suppose as a kind of a concept and a product, it's been under active development already now for about 2 years, and we have milestones and planned developments running out for the next at least 2 years and maybe 3, depending as more and more data becomes available. So we do have the core modules that we've already produced available, and we have staged delivery in place for the modules on that. So thank you all very much for that. I'll hand back to Richard Garry if there's any questions.
Hi, Richard. That's great. Thanks a million for that. I suppose a lot of what you covered there is what we have at the moment, or what's in AddressLink. Is there plans for the future? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, we have an ongoing sort of set of research projects internally, which we're hoping to turn into products. And some of these, as I mentioned in the presentation there, are kind of leveraging sensed imagery, whether it's remotely sensed imagery or aerial photography and the like, to pick out things like roof condition, solar panel suitability, and so on. But we're also looking at other data sets that are made available by planning authorities and so on to look at the planning history of buildings. Our fire model is under active development in Ireland and the UK. We don't have them linked together yet, but again, we want to provide seamless coverage, so there's active research work going on there to make a seamless model on that. The floor area, I suppose, is something the kind of use by floor area, which is using data from a range of different sources, including the valuation office and other data producers. That's something that we're really interested in advancing further. So we've got a fair bit of work ahead to get these out, but you know, I think we're making very good progress on them.
Okay, it sounds like you're going to be busy for a while.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks for that. Okay, our next presenter is Feargal O'Neill, Gamma's CEO. Similar to Richard, he's been in over, I think, 25 years experience at least in spatial data consulting and building solutions for many of Ireland's, I suppose, biggest organisations. He's a town planner by training. Feargal has advised many organisations on how to reduce risk through the application of spatial data, not just in insurance, but across other sectors as well. Feargal is going to tell us a little bit about how location intelligence is driving parametric insurance.
Thanks, Richard.
Feargal.
First of all, can you see my screen there? You can?
Yes.
So yeah, today I'm going to talk about, hello? Richard, can you hear me, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, you can, sorry, okay. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about parametric insurance and specifically how the area we're all interested in here today, location intelligence, is driving its growth over the past few years. So there we go, sorry about that. Okay, so first of all, for those among us that might be from an insurance background, let's just define what we're talking about when we're talking about parametric insurance. So parametric insurance would differ from traditional insurance models in a number of senses. First of all, there's a pre-agreed payout. So the payout that's received after an event occurs is not related to the loss of the policyholder, but it's based on a pre-agreed payout. That payout is made when the event occurs. Events typically we're talking about here would be catastrophic events like flood, earthquakes, tsunamis, droughts, famines, things like that. But it also includes smaller events such as even things as simple as delayed flights, reductions in turnover, reductions in room rates. So basically anything that can really be defined as an event independently can be brought into this whole parametric area. And the event and the decision on whether to make a payout is always determined in parametric by what's called a trigger point, hence the term parametric, because it's related to parameters. And those trigger points are agreed between the insured and the insurance company, and they would typically be a sort of a level that has to be reached in order for a payout to be made. So an example of a trigger point may be if a hurricane of force 4 hits this particular location, that triggers a payout of an agreed amount. So that would be an example of a parametric insurance. So to give a working example, if we have an Irish farmer with a forestry stand and wants to get cover in the instance of a storm hitting his area, he may say, well, I want to get a payout of €5,000 if a storm hits my county. And that particular storm event, the trigger point for that will be where a wind speed of over 100 miles per hour is recorded at any of the independent Met Éireann weather stations that are present in my county. And that could be a parametric policy that was drawn up between the parties. I've also added the point that it isn't necessarily always covered by insurance regulations. In some cases, a parametric product may not be able to be covered by insurance, and it may be provided by another financial product, such as a derivative. And that's because it mightn't satisfy the insurance requirements. And an example of that, a sort of bizarre example, parametric insurance is in some ways a little bit like Paddy Power betting on or offering odds on a white Christmas. So this isn't parametric insurance, just to clarify, but in many respects it's similar in that the bookmaker is agreeing to pay me on the basis of an event, i.e. snowfall, occurring at a location, Dublin Airport, in the future. But it's not insurance, parametric insurance, because it doesn't satisfy, the standard requirements for insurance. There's no insurable interest in my half, and there's no requirement for me to prove any loss resulting from the event occurring. Okay, so where is it being applied historically, and where is it coming from? Well, historically, parametric insurance has very much been the sort of realm of NGOs, states, World Banks, and where pools have been provided to provide rapid relief and rapid funds in the event of a catastrophe. And that situation, for example, has occurred in places like the Caribbean, where the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility provides parametric insurance to the member states, the member islands, in the occurrence of a hurricane. So if a hurricane hits, the fund pays out to the actual state itself, to the island, and they distribute the funds very quickly to the people who've been stricken by the hurricane. It allows very, very quick distribution and payouts on funds, and that's, I suppose, the key attraction to it, to NGOs, World Banks, and people like that. In Africa, there's a similar fund, the ARC Fund, which provides similar drought relief for member states. So if a drought hits a particular country, there's certain trigger points that if a certain number of days of drought hits a state, there's a payout made, again, to provide emergency aid and funds to those states to take on that catastrophe and to provide funds to those affected. So that sort of leads into why it might be chosen as a model, and what are the advantages of parametric ahead of the traditional model. The main advantage is the speed of payouts. Because payouts are predefined, there's no real requirement for loss assessment or for claims management. Payouts can be made very, very quickly, within a matter of weeks or days. Once the event is triggered and it's confirmed that the event has taken place and that the trigger level has been reached, the payout is made. So it takes away all the cost, all the time of claims management, of potentially legal battles that are involved in traditional insurance. The second main advantage is that it's very predictable. The insurance company will know if an event hits and a trigger point is triggered, exactly the amount of payout it's going to make, because that payout has been agreed in advance. And thirdly, it provides flexibility to provide cover in places where traditional insurance may not provide. Like, for example, the global protection gap is including many, many more properties that cannot be covered for flood insurance because of historic flood claims and flood events occurring there. With parametric insurance, because the trigger levels can be set higher, for example, they may only be set that there's a payout only when flood waters reach a certain height. And because the payouts can be limited in advance, it is possible to provide some level of cover in cases where traditional insurance may not have before. So it provides that level of flexibility. Of course, when there's pros, there's always cons. The cons are, I suppose, the whole element of this basic risk. So parametric insurance may not cover the loss incurred by the party, by the policyholder. It's quite possible that an event triggers a loss but does not reach the trigger point necessary to approve a payout or to involve a payout. But I suppose, you could say the same to a certain degree with traditional insurance if you include exceptions and exclusions and things like that in the policy. The other, I suppose, con is that there's a lot of regulatory constraints. It's difficult to get up and running. As I mentioned earlier, it's often, sometimes not even included within the insurance whole realm. It has to be delivered through a different sort of financial mechanism. So in the last few years, there has been particular growth of interest in it. Every insurance conference I think I've attended in the last number of years has had someone talking about parametric and the rise of parametric insurance and the potential that it brings to the industry and to offer choice. So why is it growing? Well, I suppose the first reason is this point again: the global protection gap is growing. So more and more properties, perhaps due to climate change, are becoming uninsurable for certain types of catastrophe. Parametric offers that potential additional avenue that might provide insurance in those instances. So there is an appetite for it in those cases. The fact that location intelligence has significantly grown, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a moment, has facilitated and allowed parametric products to be created, even by smaller niche insurance providers. The cost and the availability of the technology to provide this solution is now there. That hasn't been there in the past. Similarly, there's been an increased focus by insurance providers on providing better customer service. Again, in recent conferences, there's nearly always been somebody talking about how they can speed up the claims process, how they can speed up the quotation process. Parametric offers that opportunity to make the whole customer service side better. And I suppose the other reason it's growing is that there's been a lot of new entrants in the market, especially in the last couple of years. And if we just look at a couple of them, I think it might get across the type of products that are being offered. So across the water in the UK, Flood Flash are offering parametric insurance for commercial properties that might be excluded under the Flood Re system over there. And basically it provides flood insurance to commercial properties by providing a sensor in the building which shows to what level floodwaters have reached, and payout is triggered on that basis. And I would add to that Sampo in Japan have a similar product, so it's not just in the UK that's been done. AXA's parametric unit, AXA Climate, have introduced an agricultural insurance which uses satellite imagery in partnership with the Dutch satellite technology company to provide insurance to farmers related to drought. So the satellite Earth observation data allows them to assess soil moisture at any location on the Earth, so they can quickly identify where drought is occurring, or converse, where flooding is occurring at soil level, and immediately get payouts to farmers to cover them for that event. Swiss Re have a parametric earthquake product where they promise to pay within 30 days to public bodies, particularly public entities, of an earthquake occurring. And there's even niche providers, like this is an interesting one I came across, Understory in the US, which provide parametric cover for car dealers to cover them for hailstorms. Hailstorms in the US are very, very different to hailstorms in Ireland, in that you have hailstones coming down the size of golf balls in many cases. And that causes significant damage to outdoor car dealerships in the US. So they've developed a model which predicts the potential for hailstorms, but also monitors them as they happen. So there's a payout once a hailstorm hits a particular area, the car dealership receives a parametric payout. So I suppose the relevance for today is the point that location intelligence very much is making all this possible. And I suppose improvements in location intelligence are in four real areas that is facilitating this. So firstly, we have way more frequent and better, and indeed a lot cheaper Earth observation data. People in Copernicus and the European Space Agency, Google Earth, NASA, they're all largely free data available certainly from Copernicus and NASA. There's private sector operators, Planet, providing frequent, detailed and better Earth observation data, which is central to much of the parametric products being made available. In addition to that, there's far more public APIs, public data being made available that are easy to access and generally free to provide the trigger data necessary. Like in this case in Ireland, we've APIs from Met Éireann, from the OPW, to provide data on river water levels. So that again drives the adoption of parametric. There's been big improvements in Internet of Things sensors. This particular image shows the flood flash sensor. The long sort of pole to the right of the door there is the flood flash sensor. So that's receiving regular rapid data from the location all the time, telling them of any event that might be occurring there. Another aspect that is often not mentioned but is equally as important is the global rise in the quality of geocoding. There's far better geocoding available globally. There's much more data at rooftop level, at building level. The matching engines have improved. There's organizations such as What3Words are providing geocoding where it wasn't possible before. So geocoding is absolutely essential in these solutions, as it is in all risk solutions for location intelligence, in that the risk property must be located precisely in order to associate it with the trigger points, to associate it with the risks that we're covering against. So this availability is certainly driven on parametric as well. And finally, I suppose the improved location intelligence technology, especially those based in the cloud, including our own here, Peril Finder, which allows the rapid and cost-effective processing, mass processing of the data available and necessary to deliver these products, which wouldn't have again been available 10 or 15 years ago. We can cost-effectively provide rapid processing, rapid monitoring, dynamic checking of the data into solutions that are required for this. So let's look at some of the applications for Ireland, what we've seen, what is possible. Well, clearly the flood option, there's no real reason why the flood flash product or similar products can't be made available in Ireland. Solutions around crop failure, drought, flood. Drought might be a funny one for Ireland, that we seem to always be seeing rain, but I suppose indications of climate change is that summer droughts are going to become more frequent in Ireland, and it may become an issue in the future that it is actually a problem. There's also a whole range of non-location intelligent ones that we could work on. There's already companies providing parametric insurance, one based in Ireland, actually Blink in Cork, for, I suppose, events such as flight delays. And the one, I suppose, the most interesting, I suppose, in terms of, I suppose, our current situation is pandemics. I didn't really want to talk about COVID, but pandemics is an area that certainly leans towards parametric for many, many reasons. And indeed, back in 2018, Marsh brought out a parametric pandemic product called Pathogen RX. And it was released in, I think, May in 2018. And when COVID really hit in November 2019, all those clever people who took up this cover were celebrating. Well, they would have been if anyone had taken it up, because lucky for Marsh, they didn't actually sell any of the cover, and there was no clients for the particular product when COVID hit. And now COVID is excluded from the product, but it is a solution that should become much more popular in the future, now that we've seen the problems in terms of providing cover in a situation like we've experienced with COVID. Because in parametric cover of pandemics, we can get the data, for example, we can track where it's occurring. We can set up fairly straightforward trigger points in terms of perhaps the number of days lockdown that the government have imposed, the number of deaths in a particular area, and so forth. So that's all I've got to say on parametric. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks for that, Feargal. Certainly very interesting. I suppose a lot of people watching here are from large insurance companies. Should they be worried? I mean, is parametric insurance going to replace traditional insurance models in the future?
No, they shouldn't be worried. I mean, I don't think parametric has ever been set up to replace traditional insurance, and it only suits certain types of cover and certain types of events. It's certainly a very useful partner to be part of an overall insurance solution, in that it can provide part of the cover, in terms of providing a rapid payouts, particularly in the case of catastrophes, before the claims are processed. So I think it can work alongside traditional insurance, and even in some cases, parametric payouts can be made prior to events. And there's been certain cases or instances where the payout can be linked to, an event warning. Even if there's an event warning, a small part of the payout can be made to allow the policyholder perhaps to put up protective stuff around their houses, or maybe to reduce the impact of the event when it does occur. So I don't think it's ever intended to completely replace, but I think it can certainly work in parallel and certainly offer cover in instances where traditional insurance doesn't suit, such as heavily flooded areas.
Okay, all right. Well, that's comforting. So our next speaker is Niall Kavanagh. He's the Managing Director of Verisk. Niall has a lot of experience delivering solutions in the insurance sector over the years, previously working for our Risk Intelligence Ireland before they were taken over by Verisk in 2016, I think. Niall is going to introduce us to the uses of data in detecting fraud in the motor insurance sector. So I'll hand over to you, Niall.
Thanks, Richard. I think Feargal needs to take down his slide before I can share mine.
Okay.
Sorry. Saying the stage is full. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
okay,
perfect.
You can see that,
Thanks.
Richard? Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks. Okay. So first off, I'd just like to thank yourself, Richard, and Feargal, for obviously the invite today. I'm going to talk a bit about what we're doing in the market, primarily around motor, and use of data for, I suppose, fraud modeling. Just for background and context, I don't know how easy it is to read this, but just Verisk itself has been in operation for nearly 50 years, about 10,000 staff worldwide. I think we have 80 office locations or something like that. Specifically in Ireland, we've been operating for about 30 years before we were acquired in April 2016 by Verisk. The Verisk company worldwide, I suppose we have a very strong reputation in data analytics. We have very large actuarial teams in the US and in our European hub in Poland. I suppose the key value that we provide to our clients is that we're using data to identify actionable intelligence. Specifically in the Irish market, we're known for our risk assessment solutions and managing the AddressLink claims database on behalf of members. Staying again just in Ireland, our services that we have available cover the complete insurance lifecycle from quotation to claims. Within the AddressLink side, approximately 95% of the market are contributing data to that database, which is then available to the members. On our risk assessment solutions, the vehicle intelligence is used by motor underwriters. About 80% of the market are using that today through direct and brokers. And we're working also on providing other solutions outside motor in relation to other personal lines and commercial lines, helping insurers assess risk more effectively. Just very briefly, we have a very broad set of data that we've gathered and aggregated across the market in relation to vehicles, people, and properties. But today I'm just going to focus specifically on the vehicle aspect and the use of that data in identifying potential fraud. Okay, so just to put some context on it, so to draw the distinction between risk and fraud. So our solutions are helping clients identify potential risk effectively, which fraud is a subset. So I just wanted to qualify, there's lots of different data that the insurer uses internally or externally, like through service providers like ourselves, to validate the information that they're getting, potentially to shorten the customer journey, but also to look at things like for non-disclosure. We don't specifically look to call out something as being fraud. We're identifying maybe behavior or aspects of what the policyholder or the claimant has told the insurer that maybe doesn't get backed up by fact. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give 3 examples of how data could be used to identify, I think it's what is suspicious behavior. I'm not making the claim that it is fraud. That's for, I suppose, the courts to decide ultimately, but I think it gives a good example of how the data creates that value for the insurers. There is an important distinction as well in non-disclosure, especially with the Consumer Insurance Contracts Act, that this idea of intentional versus non-intentional non-disclosure or misrepresentation is a factor. So just again, it's just, the data which we think helps the insurer to identify something that doesn't look right and raises a flag either at quotation stage or at the claim side, and how they can use that data to determine next actions. So the first one I just want to talk about very briefly is modified car data. Now, the slide here shows, I suppose, information mainly from the UK. It's been sourced from Money Supermarket, but I think the key figure here from that they have found is that 45% of people who own modified cars do not notify their insurer about this. I believe Irish insurers, from talking to them, would have a concern about that as well. There are some things done to try and overcome that through asking the policyholder, especially if you have a young driver, to send in photos of the car to see if there's been some external modifications made, but that's not going to, I suppose, really identify if the engine's been shipped or things like that. But I suppose what we have over the years identified is there are other ways to get data that can help maybe validate whether a car has been modified or not. So I suppose an owner of a modified car probably knows that if they inform their insurer, they would pay a higher premium. So they might choose not to mention it. But if they were trying to sell the car, you can be guaranteed they will try and list all the features and all the changes they've made, because they've obviously put that cost into the car and they're looking to recoup it. So here's 2 pictures of, I think it's a Skoda and a Jetta, Volkswagen Jetta and a Skoda Octavia, that were advertised for sale. So, they look like they're quite standard, normal family cars, probably shouldn't raise any concerns. If somebody's looking for insurance from them, unless there was any other aspects, they would probably be relatively straightforward to get a quote. However, when they were advertised, they obviously put up some detail about their car. And from here, you can obviously spot that there is some aspect of risk that the insurer might want to be aware of. I think the Skoda Octavia should be 170 brake horsepower, and it's showing up as the 240 here. So obviously the modifications have made the car considerably, the performance of it has been significantly improved. Now, beyond it being able to be fast and whatever else, a number of these modifications are of concern because the car wasn't manufactured that way from a road safety perspective and things like that. But also maybe it indicates the type of behavior of the owner if they're buying a car that has this type of modification to it. So through our services, we can provide real-time point of quote notification to the insurer if there are these type of alerts on the vehicle. And this is, I suppose, in the non-disclosure space that the policyholder has elected not to, or deliberately, or maybe they weren't aware of it, that there has been some modifications done to the car, either by them or a previous owner. In the second example, I'm just looking at the vehicle ownership history. Now, this particular car just been tracked on a graph, registered in 2013, and by 2018 it had 9 owners. Now, it's not very common, but I think from our analysis, I think there's 47 cars that were manufactured in 2013 that have 9 or more owners. So it's not a very rare event. But I think the key thing here you can see is that there was a very high frequency of changes in owner in the last year or so, up to 2019. That was immediately followed by a Category A claim. Okay, so through our analysis, we identified this particular case and went and spoke to the insurer. At the time, they hadn't seen it as a suspicious case. It was actually a burnout. But based on this analysis, they've reopened the case to look at it again. So I think insurers, traditionally maybe have looked at the number of owners or maybe how long the current owner has had the vehicle, but we think there's a lot more layers of information below that are relevant. And fair enough, this is one example, but it does showcase that there's further insights that you can get from the information that you probably have today. I think this car, the last date of sale was actually 8 days before it burned out. So just in the next example I just want to talk to you about is insurers today are getting more and more information from policyholders or claimants via photographs. People have obviously their smartphone with them. Some insurers have started asking for the policyholder to send in pictures of the car. I think Cuvée is the name of the company in the UK, and there's others. I think it's common practice in South America, or a number of countries in South America, and may become common in the future. But on the claim side, whether they are being asked to do it or they're electing to do it, more and more people are taking pictures at the scene and sending the pictures to their insurer. They may end up in emails. The insurer may or may not be able to use the information. They may look at the pictures, but there's key data associated with that imagery that insurers could be getting value from. So any picture taken with a smartphone today will include information that's easily extractable, which includes the location where the photo was taken, the original date, if the picture was modified before it was sent. You can also use software to identify if the picture has been manipulated as well. And then the make and model of the phone, whether it's relevant or not. So this information is being used today. Verisk, we have a product called Fraudstar that's helping insurers, a number of insurers in the UK, and we're talking to Irish insurers about that as well, that is looking at image manipulation, which is relatively straightforward to identify, the potential use of stock images. So grab a picture off Google and use it to claim that here's a picture of my car that's been damaged. Unusual location, so the location of the accident as well versus the location of the photos can be quite different. So to demonstrate that, what I just did is I took a picture of this car and I just used a free service called Metapix, and I uploaded the picture, and I got, I'd say, probably 100 data points from the image. Now, a lot of them are irrelevant, are about to do with the flash and how far I was standing from the car and things like that. But in this example, you can see obviously on this slide the make and model of the phone that the picture was taken from. So may or may not be relevant, but that information is there. In addition, you can now see that I can get the dates when the image was taken. So the image was taken at 9:23 on I think the 26th of August, a Sunday morning. But I think where more relevant is I can extract as well the exact GPS coordinates of this image, where it was taken. Okay. Very simple to extract that data. What I've just done is I've taken the information and put it into Google Maps, and you can see the little red icon, the exact point where this image was taken. On the left-hand side, I'm not sure if it's clear, it says Marine Boardwalk, Greystones, County Wicklow. It's not actually on a road. It's actually down at the harbour in Greystones and County Wicklow. And just to confirm that location, here's another picture from the other side of the car showing it in that exact location. So the the accuracy of that information with the image it is very, very good. And I believe it is not widely known, maybe, and it's definitely not been widely used within the insurance industry to identify potential fraud. And there is, I believe, tremendous value in that, and it's information insurers have today and potentially could be making use of it. So that's a whistle-stop tour of some of the applications of using motor data in identifying potential fraud. Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that, Niall. We're also joined today by Robert Moss. He's a senior data and GIS analyst with Zurich. Just, I suppose, one or two questions there, Robert. We've obviously seen a lot of discussion today about data and open data. Are there other data sets that you see available to the insurance sector, would like to see available to the insurance sector that aren't currently there? Be valuable.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Did you hear my question there, actually?
Yep, I did. So I think from my own area of expertise, which is looking at flood risk and flood risk assessment, I think it's not so much about the availability as the accessibility of the data. So there's a raft of data available if you know where to look about flood defenses, for example, on top of what the OPW provide. So there would be smaller defense works, property level protection measures that could be accessible through searching planning applications, looking at design specifications for housing estates, etc. And I think to draw these together into one data repository, for example, perhaps tagging to some sort of an air code kind of level like the AddressLink would make the process of getting flood cover for customers in, say, new build estates where it had been built with flood in mind. It would make that process a lot easier for the customer. It would take a lot of the stress out of the situation. It would make our decisions more accurate and representative of the risk. And I think that's an issue at the moment is around flood defences, and with government bills being pushed forward about recognition of defences, it would take the availability of data and kind of democratise it and perhaps make it available to the customer as well through an air code search. So I think it's just about taking those disparate sources of information and drawing it together into one central repository. I mean, that's kind of a dream. It would make things a lot easier for the customer and the industry, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like great if you could get to that point. And I suppose another thing as well, just sort of related to this, I know from looking in other countries like the US and the UK, there seems to be lots of data available there. Is there anything that you've seen somewhere else that might be useful if it was available in Ireland?
Yeah, I think in the immediate short term, I think the most valuable thing to us is going to be that national LiDAR picture, like they have, like it's available in the UK. I mean, that's going to improve the accuracy of the flood modelling, and again, improve the accuracy of the output for the customer. But the other side of it as well, from a peril perspective, I know JBA had been working on an observational subsidence data set using satellite imagery to estimate changes in height above sea level. So I think that would be an absolute game changer for the peril of subsidence in Ireland. And I think it would, again, make our decisions fairer to the customer and make sure that when we are assessing subsidence risk, we're not relying on soil or bedrock models, which can add a degree of uncertainty. We're actually looking at the movement as it happens real time, and we can perhaps prevent loss before it even occurs. And I mean, that does draw questions around duty of care to the customer as well. So how do we use that data? But I think honestly that's one of the most exciting developments coming out of the UK. I think University in London, that would be of great benefit, especially in Cork and areas like that.
Yeah, it's certainly one that we're keeping an eye on. All right, it'd be great to see how that pans out. A question actually for you, Feargal, just in relation to the sensors. I mean, that sensor that was stuck to the door in your image, I mean, could you try to tamper with that or fake a claim on it? Throw a bucket of water into it or something?
From my understanding of it is they're quite complicated models that are behind the sensors. So it's not just a throw a bucket of water and it triggers a lodgement into your account. There's a continuous flow. There's a continuous flow of data into a rather complicated model that would pick up any unusual spikes or peaks in terms of, you know, if there's a sudden spike of water in the middle of a 30-day drought in the middle of summer, you know, it's not going to lead to a payout. And similarly, in some cases, there's more than one trigger. So it may be that to trigger a payment requires the sensor to hit, but also there to be a local river height trigger as well, that it had to have reached a certain level in order to reach it. So it's very rarely that simple that they can't
so they're
be
relying
fooled
on
very
more than
easily,
one
no.
data trigger, I suppose. It's not just there's water in this sensor.
Yeah, it's a full model behind it, really.
A question actually for Richard. I don't know if you'd be able to answer this on the spot, but house height data what house height data do you have? How is it derived, and how much of the country is covered? Have you got that to hand?
Not directly to hand, but we do have a number of different data suppliers in that space. I mean, there are companies out there capturing LiDAR data, and from that building digital surface and digital terrain models. And what we can do with those is stamp the building footprints onto us and pull out the height of the buildings. So that's something that's under active development. It's more advanced in the UK, where we've actually built models ourselves from publicly available data. The Environment Agency in the UK has a massive LiDAR data capture program, and they're making that data freely available. So we can apply building outlines. Again, there's open source building outline data, but there's also more detailed commercial data available from OSGB. And we can merge these data sources and extract building height data from that. So it's something that is more readily available at a much lower cost to the end user in the UK. In Ireland, it's under active development, and the likelihood is that it is not going to be built from freely available data sources, so there will be some sort of cost attached.
Okay, grand. And one question, actually, Niall, in terms of new data that insurers are using or should be looking at in the future, or are using in other countries, is there something that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, if I just say with, I suppose, the team of Motor, specifically, it's the data that's now available in relation to ADAS features in cars. We're working actively with clients in Ireland who are very keen to obviously identify what features are on the cars, whether they're by default or optional. But where we see the real value is we've started doing work on identifying which features, so lane departure, frontal collision, whether they actually help reduce the cost of insurance. So they're all being touted as car safety features, but the claim experience is telling us otherwise for some of the features, and some of them are very effective, and I think some of them would become defaults, like a seatbelt, but some of them are very questionable because the cost of repairs for those vehicles are very high, and that's where a significant amount of our focus is at the moment.
Okay, brilliant. Look, we're running a little bit over here, so we might just wrap it up at this stage. I'd like to just thank everyone for attending today. Thanks to our speakers as well for the presentations. If you're free next Thursday, the 12th at 10 a.m., we've got a final webinar that's going to focus on climate change in Ireland and the UK. We're going to be joined by some experts from Ambiental and Terra Firma, and we'll have Richard Cantwell presenting his white papers on those. We'll also be joined on the day by Barry O'Dwyer. He's a climate change scientist from UCC, and he's going to give us an update on the recent changes in climate change that we should be aware of. So, yeah, if you get a chance, maybe sign up for that for next week. That's the 12th now, not tomorrow. So thanks again, and we might leave it there. Have a good day. Thanks. Bye-bye.